everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use GitHub Copilot directly inside of VS Code with Power BI. And the best part is you don't really need to rely on third-party tools. So let me start with a quick intro of why this video has emerged. Let's head over to my channel. So firstly, a huge thank you to all of you who connect with the channel to consume the content. It's a small and growing workspace, but it means a lot to me, so thank you for your continued support. So in recent weeks, I've been creating a few videos around how you can use Power BI with GitHub Copilot and Claude Desktop in order to boost your productivity and enhance the way you work with Power BI. But one of the questions that I've been facing repeatedly over the last couple of weeks is, what if you can't install third-party tools such as Claude Desktop within your environment? Now that might be because maybe your organization doesn't allow you to do that, or it might be because your clients have restrictions on their environments and therefore you're not allowed to install third-party tools like Claude Desktop. And that's perfectly fine. We already have a solution to this, and that is we covered in our previous videos, and that is to use the Power BI modeling MCP server. So let's head back over to Visual Studio for this, and I'll walk you through the process. So here we are in Visual Studio Code, and this is the opening page. So what I need to do, let's just come over to the left-hand side here, and let's click on the Extensions button. And you will see I have the Power BI Modeling MCP server highlighted there. And if you don't see it, you can simply come to the search box and type in MCP, and you will see Power BI Modeling MCP server at the top. Alternatively, you can also type in Power BI. So let me click on that, and you can see this particular extension has been installed. That's why I'm only seeing the uninstall button here, and it's also enabled, so we're in a good position. So if you haven't already done so, please follow one of my previous videos, and in those videos I show you exactly how to install the MCP server. So now that we've found our server within Visual Studio, let's go over to the top here, and you will notice a chat button. You can see that just at the top there. So if I highlight that for you, that chat button there, and if I click that, it opens up the chat pane directly inside of Visual Studio. So I'm going to start by looking at the Copilot chat windows at the bottom. I'll talk you through high level what these do, and then I'll show you how to connect your GitHub Copilot through VS Code to a Power BI project and use it for real tasks like modifying your DAX, commenting your code, or anything else to enhance your working and productivity. Remember, this is exactly what you can do with third-party tools like Claude Desktop, for example, but the simpler way is if you're already using, or if you already have access to Visual Studio Code, which is a lightweight developer integration tool which is readily available and there should be no restrictions on that, and this is the best way you can achieve this. So first off then, we have the Add Context button here. So this allows you to add more files or information to GitHub Copilot within VS Code, and that's so you can give the chat and the engine more context about what you're trying to do. So if I was to click on here, it opens up other options, and you can pick the files and folders where you want to include further information to be consumed for context. Let's move on. Next up, we have the Agent button, and you can see that just here. So if I highlight that for you there, we have the Agent button, and it's currently set to Agent, and the options are Agent, Ask, and Plan. So under the default setting, which I have here, Agent, this gives Copilot permission to work across multiple files, inspect your workspaces, and perform more complex tasks on your files, your Power BI files. Next up, we have the Ask button, and the Ask button is literally, as the name suggests, If you simply want to ask questions of the Power BI model itself or anything to do with your Power BI model, then you can switch this over to the Ask setting and you can use this as a general AI chat. It will answer questions, explain code, without necessarily making any changes to your underlying file. We then have the plan setting, and the plan setting is a bit more deeper because imagine you want to make some bigger changes to your underlying model, but you need to plan them out more thoughtfully. So under the plan setting, when you give GitHub Copilot more context, it will firstly plan out or create the blueprint for the task that you've asked it to complete. It will do this initially without simply diving in and making any changes, and it will map out the exact steps that you need to complete before any action is completed itself. So this gives you a chance to validate what GitHub Copilot is about to do, rather than simply making a large-scale change on an enterprise model, for example. So if you're looking to make bigger changes, I would certainly recommend switching the setting over to plan so that you're confident it's not going to harm your existing work. Next up, we have the auto setting, and this is your AI model settings. Currently it's on auto. You do have the ability to pick between other models. As you can see here, I've not upgraded my Copilot and VS Code environment, so some of the models need to be upgraded, but I can go into manage models, and if I'm more comfortable looking at or selecting which models I want to use, because I'm familiar with them, I can do so by going over to the auto button here. For me, simply keeping it on auto is fine, and I imagine that would be absolutely fine for the majority of use cases out there. Next up, we have the configuration tools, and this is where you can come into the MCP server and look at what it's about to do. So currently, you see here, my MCP server is not ticked. So I'm going to tick that just to enable the Power BI modeling MCP. So let's do that. Let's go back over here. And for some reason I have two. It probably doesn't make much difference, but I'm going to tick both of them. And now we are switched on in terms of the Power BI modeling MCP server. So with that, now let's connect to our open Power BI files. If I go over to Power BI here, you'll see we have our evergreen AdventureWorks file, which I constantly use in all examples. And let's go back to Visual Studio Code and let's see if we can connect to this Power BI file. So I've asked GitHub Copilot to connect to the open Power BI instance, and one thing you will notice straight off is it is a little bit slower when compared to third-party apps such as Claude Desktop. Nevertheless, it still does the job, and the other thing, it will ask you for permission at various stages. So it's saying it's checking for active connections and does it want me to allow the connection. So I'm going to allow that here. And now GitHub Copilot within Visual Studio Code has successfully connected to the open Power BI desktop instance. So this is similar to what Claude Desktop was doing, only now we're doing it within Visual Studio Code. Perfect. So let's move on now. So now that we're connected, we can ask GitHub Copilot to list out all the measures or tell us how many measures they are. Can you tell me how many measures are in the model? And it's telling me the connected Power BI model contains 12 measures. So let's go back over to Power BI. Let's expand the measures folder. And we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, exactly 12 measures in here. And the 13th one, actually, that's not a measure, it's most likely a column within the table. But we do have two measures which have an error. So we have top-end sales, and if I click on that, you can see the sales amount measure is underlined in red, telling me there's a problem with this measure. And the reason for that is, if you followed my previous video, all we did is we simply moved the sales amount measure from the fact internet sales fact table into the measures table, and as a result of that, the definition of this measure is still pointing to the fact table. So that's relatively easy to fix. So this measure is called top-end sales. Let's go back into Visual Studio Code and ask it to correct this measure. So we've asked GitHub Copilot to fix the issue with the top-end sales measure. Let's see what it comes back with. And once again, it's asking for confirmation. It obviously knows what it's doing. It's about to update the top-end sales measure. Do I want to continue? Let's click on yes. And after a few confirmations, it's now saying fixed top-end sales. That measure has been fixed now, so you can see that just there. Perfect. So let's go back into Power BI and see what it's done. And I can see now the top-end sales measure does not contain the red warning icon as you see over here. It's been corrected simply by pointing it to the sales amount measure, which is now under the measures table. So with that, I've corrected a measure which was incorrect based on movement of measures. And similarly, let's repeat the same for the custom value. I'm not entirely sure what it's trying to achieve here. It's quite a historic measure, but let's go ahead and do the same thing with the custom value measure. As you can see, it's currently pointing to fact internet sales, but the sales amount measure now sits within the measures table. So let's go over to GitHub Copilot and tell it to repeat the same. So I've asked GitHub Copilot to apply the same fix to the custom value measure within the Power BI model, and it's telling me it's applied the fix successfully. So let's go back over to Power BI and have a look. And once again, the custom value measure no longer has the red warning triangle next to it. So this is how I can use GitHub Copilot embedded within Visual Studio Code to work with my Power BI files directly if I don't want to use third-party tools such as Claude Desktop or anything else which may not be permitted due to organizational restrictions and policies. What I also want to try doing is identifying any unused columns within my Power BI model. So let's ask GitHub Copilot if it can trace anything which is unused as far as it can see. So I've asked GitHub Copilot to go ahead and trace anything, and once again it wants permission to go ahead and do that, and I've allowed that. And now, as we can see, GitHub Copilot has performed the analysis, and it's come back and it's telling me the unused columns have been identified. So it's telling me that only these measures are using the columns which are essentially consumed in the model, meaning everything else is classed as being unused. So the total columns in the model are 523, which you can see here. Columns referenced by measures are 7, meaning 516 columns are not referenced by measures, and therefore GitHub Copilot assumes these to be unused. Now, whilst it's not listed out every column, it is telling me that these are the tables, so all the columns in dim account, dim currency, dim date, dim employee, dim geography, all the way to the end here, prospective buyer, are unused. Now, whilst that's great analysis, it's something which speeds up your productivity. If I was to do that, it could take me hours, maybe even days. But if GitHub Copilot can do that for you, it certainly gives you a productivity boost. The only thing I would suggest here is I would not take this for face value and just go ahead full steam ahead assuming this to be correct. So whilst I've looked at these columns and tables here, my gut feel is that the dim date table, at least, could be referenced in a measure. I kind of trust GitHub Copilot with what it's come back with, but because this is the AI and not a human, AI should be used to augment what the human is doing rather than to replace, and we should not be solely relying on AI fully because that could be more detrimental to our work. So I will go ahead actually and check that for myself. At least dim date should be a table where I could have possibly used some columns in time intelligence formulas or measures. But if that is the case, then it could prove that AI is only suggestive, and we should always validate that regardless. But if this is indeed correct, then I've certainly saved many hours, if not days, of work just by asking questions from GitHub Copilot within Visual Studio Code. Okay, so hopefully this video was an eye-opener for you. Hopefully it's a interim solution where you are not permitted to use third-party tools such as Claude Desktop. Visual Studio Code with the Power BI Modeling MCP Server extension enabled allows you to work with your Power BI models just inside of Visual Studio Code. I hope that video was useful for you, and I'll see you in the next one.